welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Primus Scott Daly.
And I'm Secundus Matt Freeman.
And we would have been joined by I forgot, what's the third one?
It's
Tertius?
Tertius, yeah.
We would have been joined by Tertius Eliot, but we killed him.
Yep.
We killed him.
Yeah. I mean, you're next. But anyway,
Is there a way to poison a podcaster? Can you spray poison on the microphone and my mouth gets too close to it? I inhale it and die. This could be a murder mystery.
Yeah, we call that a hot mic.
This week on the show, it is another one of our Council of Doof episodes. Matt, what are these monthly episodes we do? Explain them.
Well, once a month, those individuals that donate to us on Patreon at the Doof Warrior level or above, our Council of Doof, will get to collectively decide on a movie for the community to consider for entrance into the canon. Scott and I, and then maybe some guests, will meet, talk about that movie, and then present our case for why it should or should not be admitted.
But as always, we are leaving the final decision up to you guys, our listeners. So stick around, listen to our arguments, and then find the link in the show notes to go cast your vote and see whether or not this show will be entered into that canon. Matt, what has our council brought to us today?
This week, the council has elected the 2007 film Stardust.
Okay, So we're going to be talking all about this adorable little film, Matt. And then I think we've just got some what we've been watching there at the end. You've got a movie that you watched that you want to talk about, and I'll talk about something that I watched that I want to talk about a lit, and then we'll wrap up our episode. It's gonna be a nice light, fun one.
Yeah.
So let's get right into Stardust. Let's just talk about. I mixed up the way I normally do it. I usually end on the word Stardust, not in the middle of the sentence, and it's thrown me all off.
I understand.
Let's talk about Stardust. To put in trailer, nailed it, boom. Matt, what is Stardust about?
In a countryside town bordering on a magical land, a young man makes a promise to his beloved that he'll retrieve a fallen star by venturing into the magical realm. Yeah. By director Matthew Vaughn, based on a story by Neil Gaiman.
And it was actually written by Jane Goldman, who I think it was written by Jane Goldman and Matthew Vaughn, who I think are frequent collaborators. I think they have written just about all of the movies he's directed, which is, I have to talk to you about Matthew Vaughn in this movie because this is, I think, the most interesting thing about it. But before we get into that, I want to know, Matt, what are your overall thoughts on the movie Stardust? Had you seen this before, and what are your thoughts?
Yes, I don't remember when I first saw it, but I saw it a long time ago. I've always liked it. I've always thought it was a great, fun, tightly made, just really enjoyable film. And I continue to believe that now. So that is my opinion. How about you, Scott?
Yeah, I had seen this before, I think only one time. I've also read the Neil Gaiman story. Have you read the Neil Gaiman book?
No, I haven't.
I read that too. Recently, actually, I kind of went on a kick a year or so ago where I just read or reread all of Gaiman because he's just fantastic. And I like this story. It's small is not the right word because it's pretty spanning, right? They're miles and miles and huge worlds of we see a bunch of different bits and pieces of this world, but it's just trying to be this kind of cute little fun fairy tale. And I think in that it does succeed.
I
think there's a lot of people that might call this movie slight, but I hate that word because I'm always what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? But I think it's just it's just a good time.
Yeah. Right. I think really it's fun, right? I think that's the tone that it's going for, I think has a lot to do with it because I think maybe part of what you're subconsciously registering on, and maybe I am too, because I kind of feel the same as you, is it seems like so many of our fantasy adventure stories culminate in a giant battle between two armies. Mm-hmm. or more, or a dragon or something. And this movie, the final battle is a couple witches and a guy and a couple guys with swords. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, I love that. I think this is great.
Yeah.
This is such in fact, that's my favorite sequence of the movie is actually the voodoo doll sequence, which I hope we get to talk about later.
Oh, we sure will. Yeah.
But yeah, it's not trying to be epic but it is a fairy tale, and that's actually pretty unusual. Like it seems like in most of our movies, if it's a fairy tale, they're going to go epic with it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of refreshing in that way.
Especially this time, right? This was 2007. It's probably like 4 years after Lord of the Rings, but it was still in that like post Lord of the Rings time when everyone was like greenlighting every single epic fairy story in an attempt to grab the Lord of the Rings audience. And they were all doing it. Like, you remember the Chronicles of Narnia ones where the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe ends in this huge, massive battle that's like,
yes,
they're trying for Lord of the Rings so bad.
Violent massacre in the children's book.
Yes. And this movie, like, I think was greenlit because of those movies, but I agree with you, is trying to do something different. And I think Tolkien would have loved this story, actually.
Yeah. Right. It's more of a fairy tale than it is a fantasy story, and that's what's charming about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And God, there's so many cool things. Like the cast is just all across the board great. I mean, they hired Ian McKellen, the narrator, which is just always a good decision. Always.
Yeah.
I love Charlie Cox, who plays Tristan. Sienna Miller plays Victoria, who is just like the perfect awful person. And Henry Cavill, a skinnier looking Henry Cavill.
Yeah, I was proud of myself for recognizing him because he's so off of the role that we've gotten used to him seeing. I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer as the witch whose name I never remember, but is Lamia.
Yeah.
Easily the best part of the whole movie.
What a fucking tour de force Michelle Pfeiffer is. Oh my God.
She's having so much fun.
Yeah.
Like, I love it because like there's certain parts of this movie where I think my kids must have thought I was crazy because I just like I burst out laughing at one point just because of like the way she's like creepily like walking with like all hunched up with her fingers all like gnarled up and like this super like evil greedy expression on her face in her like old witch makeup. I was just like, oh, that's so good. Like, it's so perfect that I just thought it was great. I just laughed. I think like the darkness of the witches element was actually kind of great. Like the constantly cutting apart animals and wanting to like eat the heart of the woman. It's like, good old fashioned like Brothers Grimm type, actually dark fairy tale stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have to talk about Claire Danes, who just plays the perfect innocent looking, like this is why she was cast as Juliet in the 90s, because she just plays like this young kind of wide-eyed innocent person so well. And it really works for her here as well. I thought she was great. I guess the tone is maybe where I want to start this conversation with you, truly, because speaking, going back to Matthew Vaughn, he is a director that is pretty well known for like brutal, like harsh action. That is like the thing that I love about him is that he mixes this idea of like this brutal over the top violence with like a jokey black comedy bent to it. Like that's what Kick-Ass is, right? Kick-Ass is this incredibly violent movie, incredibly violent, incredibly graphic. And it's so thoroughly aware of itself that it has fun with it. And I think actually the Kingsman movie is similar in that regard, that it is just this movie that is so violent, but is having just a good time. It's like a send up of spy movies, just like Kick-Ass is kind of like a send up of comic book movies. This is not really a send up of like these kind of fairy fantasy type stories. It just is one. And that's why I'm kind of fascinated by the ways in which, but by Matthew Vaughn's reasoning for saying, yes, this project, yes, I'm gonna make Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels, Snatch, and then Stardust.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm sort of on this kick recently of like really being into things that are just skillful executions of simple sort of tropey storylines. I love a good subversion, obviously. But lately maybe I'm getting old or something, but like I'm just really liking a story where it's just like it's a fairy tale, super well executed, takes itself the exact right amount of seriously, where like it does have a light tone, but it's not at the expense of itself.
Sure. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, isn't this ridiculous that we're doing a fairy tale? It's like
Right.
it's you know, the violence makes you worried. You care about the characters. You know, I think the violence is used very, very cleverly in that regard. Actually, like I always notice when Septimus ambushes Captain Shakespeare in his room and has basically beaten him, and you see that there's like blood on his face from where he's been attacked, and it's like they cut over the part where Septimus is hitting him, and they just show him having a bloody nose.
Yeah.
And I always think that's interesting because, like, if this was a kids movie, like a real just kind of straight up normal boring kids movie, I don't think the blood would be there. And it's not like that moment is played in some horribly violent way, but it's just like, there's a little bit of blood there. You know, the implication of real danger, real violence.
Yeah,
And I think that actually works really well.
I agree. And I think that's like, I still see Matthew Vaughn in this movie. Like, as much as I've made all these ridiculous, like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Stardust, it's just what? But I still see him in this movie, right? I think there's a lot of like irreverent humor, like just like this. It comes from the source material. It comes from Gaiman, because this book is just very Gaiman-esque in its humor, of course, because it's him. Like the ghosts of all the princes, like hanging out and watching their brothers attempt to win is something straight out of the book. And I don't remember if in the book they all looked like however the way they died, but the choice to do that in this movie, I think, was so wonderful, because it's kind of dark, right? Like, you're looking at a prince's face and his nose is smashed because he fell 10 stories down when his brother pushed him out of a window as his dying father, cackled. And yet it's just so goofy at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. It's delightful. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something my kids respond to, where they're sort of fascinated by this idea of like, oh, they're ghosts, but they're not like, you know, Mario ghosts where they're like, you know, amorphous. They're not like Ghostbusters ghosts where they're just sort of generically scary and weird. They're graphically, violently murdered people.
Yeah, yeah.
And
one dude gets his throat slit.
Gets his throat slit, and the blood is blue because you can't show a guy with red blood gushing. I almost wonder if they shot that scene with red blood and then they were like, okay, that's too far. Let's somehow dial that back a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I hadn't thought of that. It just kind of jumped out at me, and I was like, it's weird that it's blue. It's PG-13. This movie was, so I don't know. I don't understand the ratings board. So
yeah, I mean, apparently Jaws is PG now.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree. The tone is one of the things that makes it for me. Honestly, it's like dark but light at the same time, which is fun.
And the fact that it can you can have this really honestly creepy scene with Michelle Pfeiffer, like taking pleasure in the witchy things that she's doing, and then also this silly scene where the guy that turned into a goat gets thrown backwards so violently he hits the wall, transforms back into a goat, and dies.
Yeah,
that's
or just every time Septimus just casually murders someone. Also, like so I watched this movie. I don't know. I watched this movie like Monday or something, and then I had told my kids that I was going to watch it with them. So then I watched it again the next day, and it was one of those experiences where I don't actually recommend doing this in general, like watching a movie like 2 days in a row, because it sort of breaks the movie a little bit for you. Like you stop being into the movie and you start noticing all of the secondary things that are actually not important. But like one thing that really stood out to me the second time in my 2-day watching spree was that he just like kills everybody he comes across, just like stabs him, and it's kind of awful, but also great because it's making it's making this character out to be, formidable and ruthless and so forth.
Yeah. And his death is pretty brutal too. I mean, you want to go to that ending? You want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's just my favorite sequence. And I really do think that the whole ending sequence is a place where Vaughn's style shows through. Because I think he is actually pretty good at these, like, I don't know what to call it other than kind of the climactic set piece of the film.
It's the PG-13 version of the church in Kingsman. I've never seen Kingsman.
I still haven't seen Kingsman, but I really need to.
A man shoots everyone in a church in the head. Just like it's just a 5-minute action scene where everybody dies.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, it's great though, because like again, it's like bordering on too much, where he's breaking his limbs.
Oh my god, yeah,
and drowns him.
He drowns in thin air. Yeah, like
drowns and then uses his body, his corpse, his dead body to fight Tristan, who stabs him repeatedly.
Yeah.
It's so well done. It looks perfect, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It really looks like a corpse being dragged around by magical strings. I just love that sequence.
Definitely. Yeah. There's only one question I have about it. Like, this is the only part of the movie that stood out to me as I don't get this. This doesn't make sense. I don't understand why Michelle Pfeiffer feigns like she's given up only to immediately change her mind about that. I don't get that part.
I don't either. I think you could make an argument that she was trying to get Yvain to shine a little bit more than she was, but I don't. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is funny, and I think a bit telling that in a conversation about this movie, we talk about Septimus and we talk about Lamia for 15 minutes before the name Tristan even comes up.
Yeah,
because he's such a kind of a nothing in the story, and that's kind of okay because that's the kind of story it is. But also, he really is kind of a nothing in the story. He is
very, very much the standard hero's journey archetypal character, right? There's not a lot to him. I mean, I appreciate that they give him like the moment. Like, I appreciate that he likes the girl that is obviously terrible for him. And my all-time favorite part of the movie is Henry Cavill and Robert De Niro winking at each other at the end of the movie. That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It was so wonderful. But yeah, you're right that Tristan, I mean, even the name Tristan, no offense to our friend from Ward, is such a typical like fantasy adventure character name. It's like, oh, Tristan.
Yeah.
He's not great. He's not great. I think Charlie Cox does fine. I think it's pretty remarkable how, like, Charlie Cox is a good looking dude. He's in Daredevil and he's like an amazing badass in that show. And I think it's really interesting how like they did his hair in this movie where he looks bumbling and kind of stupid. Mm-hmm. And then Robert De Niro makes his hair long. And then like the first you see him, you're like, oh, whoa,
yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Suddenly I recognize him as a Hollywood actor.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. And that's the thing is the role calls for that kind of subdued, you can insert yourself into the character performance. Right. So it's not surprising. I mean, none of this is meant to complain or criticize. Actually, it's just like, it is funny to notice how much more fun and interesting the two great villains are, than the main character. Although I do think, like, contradicting myself completely, I do think that the love story between Tristan and Yvain is actually pretty delightful. I'm pretty bought into that. I think that was pretty well executed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because Claire Danes is so incredible. I think that's why. I think like Claire Danes' shininess can overcome Tristan's blandness a little bit.
I think you're right.
Yeah, because I think she is kind of, you know, as much as this is Tristan's movie in the very stereotypical Hollywood way, I think she's really the heart of the film. I mean, almost quite literally, right? Because the whole goal of the movie is trying to get her heart out. And the whole plot hinges around her and seeing the ways in which, like, I mean, like all her scenes, like her scenes with Michelle Pfeiffer in the inn are just all wonderful, every single one of them, because she's like being pampered in a way that she never has before. Her anger at Tristan at the beginning, like the contentiousness of the early parts of their relationship, I thought was great. She just like the way she's hostile to him is wonderful. Yeah. And then I believed her at the end. Like the movie makes her give this like 2-minute long monologue to a chipmunk. Where she's professing her love to him, and the camera, like Vaughn just puts the camera on her face and like maybe cuts away like twice to give us a chipmunk point of view, because it's really funny to see the giant beady eyes looking at her as she professes her love. But for the most part, it's just Claire Danes sitting there in front of the camera, like pouring her heart out by herself. And I thought it was very, very impactful. That's what really sold the love story to me, is that part of it.
Yeah, I agree completely. And, And it's good that it does, because I think that the movie would have lost a lot if that hadn't worked out. And but it does, right? It does, even though it's sort of a like, again, sort of a very straight up tropey, like, of course they're gonna have a meet cute, they're gonna fight, and then they're gonna fall in love.
Yeah,
But like,
yeah.
the movie takes its time with it, and like you said, it does sell you on it. Like the time they spend on the ship, whatever it's called, the lightning ship, is pretty crucial to that, actually. That's kind of the like second act lull of the movie.
Yeah, that's where we go through. I mean, that's where our characters really go through their physical transformations, because that's our big monologue scene where Tristan learns how to sword fight and all this other stuff. Yeah, it's a pretty important part of the movie that I had kind of totally forgotten about, which maybe is a smooth transition to where we can talk about Robert De Niro playing Captain Shakespeare, the greatest role in his career somehow.
Absolutely. De Niro is so much more fun as a comic actor. I mean, I guess that's sort of an obvious statement, because comedy is more fun, but it is great, right? Like, it makes the movie, it elevates the movie another notch above what it already would have been.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's doing something very, like we said, this is a pretty bog standard. That's a very negative connotation there, but it's a fairly standard, cliche is the wrong word, but it stays true to the tropes. And then we have this character that's inserted into it, and he kind of pivots the movie around him, because this is this guy who is basically this closeted gay man that is a captain of the pirate shit, and is literally in the closet. Like, he's discovered in the closet. The imagery of this movie is not subtle. He's discovered in the closet by Secundus. And I don't know. I thought he was just delightful. I thought the message he sends about, like, he kind of learns to be true to himself in a way that some of our other characters were doing as well. That's kind of part of Tristan's journey.
Yeah, I like that bit, because he was sort of counseling them on how to be better versions of themselves, and then he kind of gets to be his own. He gets his own journey of discovery and self-acceptance or whatever. But yeah, it was a very heartwarming moment when his crew is like, come on, we always knew, we don't care.
Oh yeah, that was wonderful. Yeah. I will say that there was a brief moment that my 2020 eyes and ears saw De Niro doing a very stereotypically, flamboyant gay person, and I was like, ooh, that hasn't aged well. I got over that, because I think it's just a remarkable character, and in the end, the movie has a lot to say. This character, it's not just using this as a one-off, like, throwaway joke. It's actually doing something with it. But I do think, like, 13 years later, De Niro playing that role doesn't look great, right? But that's a small complaint.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, I don't think he's like doing it over the top in a way that bothered me, but I think you're right, though. Yeah,
I think maybe the reason it stuck out so much is because of the vast contrast in the voices that he does. Like, you almost see him, like, he just completely changes himself, and that makes it stand out very much. And I was like, for a brief second there, I was like, ooh.
That's true. Yeah, like, if he had started out in his real persona, it almost wouldn't have clashed as much. That's an interesting point. Yeah. I think if I had any real, like, concrete complaints about the movie, I think that, like, ultimately it has some issues that I might classify as being pacing issues. It's hard to say exactly, because sometimes things get called pacing issues, but they're really something else that just seems like a pacing issue. But like my litmus test, if I'm watching a movie with my kids and it's sort of like an adventure movie, and then I find that there are, like, long stretches where they zone out, and then they zone back in eventually, and then they zone out again, and then they come back. Like, that's it doesn't mean that the movie's, like, bad, obviously, because they, like, kids are kids. They're, especially when they're as young as mine are, they're just not going to be interested in certain things. But it's kind of a litmus test for me to be like, okay, well, it's waxing and waning in its focus. And I think that the movie is actually pretty complicated. Like, you've got two different villains hunting these heroes. You've got, like, complicated interpersonal stuff going on between the characters. You've got you've got the each of the villains is sort of having their own independent plot line, where, Lamia has her two sisters who she's consulting with.
Yeah.
And Septimus is having to constantly like battle against the traitors in his own, like it's a pretty complicated plot is all I'm saying. And I think the result of it being so complicated is that it ends up being a bit convoluted and difficult to like get swept up in. But I don't even know if I believe that. I just think maybe it's just a bit, it's just a tad overcomplicated, but I still love it.
I think there's parts like where the complicated nature of the plot like works against it in I think very specific ways. And one of the ones that I'm thinking of specifically is that we have what seems like is going to be our third act climax at the wall, at the barrier. And then like, because we still have to resolve the witch part of the story, like our character just gets swept up and then like ridden away halfway across the country again. I'm not sure the geography at all.
Who knows how far? Yeah.
It just seems like a 20-minute horse ride or something. I don't know. It's just like, we're like, okay, no, we're done with this set piece. We need to move on to the next set piece. And it's like, oh, and then the prince shows up and he needs to go over there too. Uh-huh. And it just like, it seemed like a more organic thing would have just had it naturally come, like everyone naturally, like the final conflict would be everyone just naturally comes together at one point and then they have it out, instead of everyone naturally comes together at one point, then one of the people shows up, takes the other people away, and then we ride after them to that place too. And it's like yeah. I get wanting to have the climax at the witch's house, like, and yeah. It's a good set piece. I love it. I wonder if there's a way to more organically make that happen. And this is like, it's been a year or two since I read the book, so I don't remember the specifics if that's exactly what happened. If they got to the wall, did everything at the wall, and then went to this new location afterwards. I don't remember. But that felt a little clunky to me.
It did feel forced. Like the whole, actually, that's probably my least favorite thing, is the whole bit where he cuts a piece of her hair off and sneaks away. And like, you're supposed to think like, oh, he's a horrible monster. He's betraying her after sleeping with her. This is the worst thing ever. And then of course he just did it to play mind games with the other woman. Like it's a very weird sort of out of character thing for him, no matter how you slice it. Mm-hmm. It's an out of character weird thing for him either way. That he would just abandon her in the bed, and then like what, he's going to come back later and be like, oh yeah, I just had to go, I cut some of your hair off. And yeah, like what was that exactly? Like it doesn't really, I think it's almost like they were like, oh, here's a way we can add some drama. And then it just created this horrible snarl in the plot. Like,
yeah, I mean, it literally feels like we need a method for him to discover that she can't cross the wall. And so someone was like, we can solve that problem by having him take a lock of her hair to Victoria. So he's still fulfilling his promise, even though he's utterly uninterested in her now. And I don't understand why he had to do that. Especially since his mother is the one that actually does warn Claire Danes that she can't cross the wall. So like they had solved their own problem there. They just needed him to get back to the wall and quickly to have this dramatic sprint back to the wall. Yeah. Which is again, like he's like, she can't cross the wall, and then immediately sprints there as if he knows she's coming.
No. Yeah, that I really do think that somebody late in the writing process added that whole section in there. I think probably what happened before that was somehow or another she gets kidnapped by the witch as they're on the road or something like that. And then Tristan has to follow her like directly from whatever that scene is. And who knows how Septimus gets involved. I mean, I think Septimus's involvement is already kind of ridiculous because he like rides up to the wall, and then like it's I think it's the worst shot in the movie is like he looks at the ground, sees a bunch of like wheel treads, and then just follows the wheel treads.
He sees the burned corpse of dishwasher, whatever her name was, and like by that says, oh, they must have gone off this way. Ditchwater Sal is the name of the character. It's a wonderful name. He sees her burnt corpse and says, this way, and takes off after them.
I don't even remember why he was there in the first place.
He's trying to get the pendant from Claire Danes.
But who tipped him off that they were going to the wall?
The goat. No, the guy that turned into the girl. The guy that the witch turned into a girl tipped him off. Remember, he saw him in the wreckage of the cart and was like, oh yeah, she had the pendant.
Yes,
Yeah, but how did he know they were going to the wall?
How did he know they were going to the wall?
I don't know.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I feel like there was a big piece. I feel like somebody lost like 3 pages of script out of the middle right there, and was like, "Oh shit, I lost the pages. I gotta figure out." Okay, and then they made something up, and it was inferior. It's funny because this is a really rather minor point, but
sure, yeah.
But like I think that's the thing I was talking about, how complicated the plot is when you have I've tried to write complicated stories with like a ton of characters and a ton of like plottiness, and the problem with writing a story with a lot of plottiness to it is you end up with situations where you're like, oh shit, I have to get this character over here and I have to get this character over there at this point in time, and I just can't think of any organic way of doing that. And then your choices are either like start over and figure out a way where you can work in an organic reason why they would have done that, or just do it and hope nobody nitpicks you.
Yeah. And they are nitpicks, right? They are like barely problems with the film. But it did cause me to pause and be like, well, why is he going there? What? And I think the overarching plot is so solid, right? It's very clear. There's a MacGuffin, there's this gem, there's also the heart. They're on the same person. So boom, there's how we get everyone to chase after these people. And then we're off. And I think that works so effectively. But yeah, just some of the twistings and turnings to get us to where we need to be for this final third act are a little confusing. I'm so glad they did it though, because like Mark Strong as Septimus, man. I love Mark Strong so much. Yeah. And I'm so glad. I don't remember how involved Septimus was in the book. I'm fairly sure, someone can tell me I'm wrong, because I'm not totally confident, but I'm fairly sure their final confrontation with the witch, Septimus is already dead. So I don't think he's in that final scene in the book. But like, if you have Mark Strong being Mark Strong, you have to use him. And just the idea to use this voodoo doll thing is just so brilliant and wonderful. So I understand I completely understand their want to do it, and yeah, you just kind of have to finagle it to get there. Yeah,
I agree. I think the ending sequence is great. I love. Well, first of all, I love the moment when each of the brothers appears in the afterlife and is like, kind of takes it in and realizes like, oh shit, I'm going to be here now, huh? And then, and then I love that last bit where it's all 7 of them sitting there, and you see them all realize at the same time that Tristan is the heir, and they're like, but that means, and then they just disappear, and it's like, oh, that's such a great, like, it's such a great moment in terms of like beat to beat to beat, like moment to moment timing and scene structure. Where, because I don't think I saw that coming at all. Well, of course you see it coming because you know that he's Una's daughter, so it like you see it coming, but it might not fully click for you before the moment when he picks up the stone.
Yeah, well, I don't remember. They kind of very cleverly at the very beginning of the movie, cleverly to borderline awkwardly introduce Una. So like she's at the back of our head, right? Because like the king is talking to one of his sons, and he says, "Una?" He's like, "No, your daughter hasn't been seen for many years." And so that's like, it's planted that seed in us. And then but by the time he picks up the gem, we already know he's her son. I think.
I think we do know that, but for me, I don't remember. I think I saw this movie 10 years ago, but for me, I don't think I actually put together like, oh, that means therefore
he is king.
He's king. Yeah. So it was a great moment anyway.
It was. Geez, what else we had to talk about? I feel like there's more. I love the look of the world. I love the look of the magic and how it works. One thing, like, Michelle Pfeiffer is such a beautiful woman, right? She's so beautiful, and young Michelle Pfeiffer is so beautiful that there was a part of me while I was watching this movie that was sad every time she got a little older, and that was a very confusing thing to feel, right? Because like she's so beautiful as this young woman. So part of me's like, yeah, get you that heart. Wait, no, that's bad.
yeah. I think it's just good, you know. We were talking about something very similar in our Stephen King podcast this week, actually. But like, I think it's just good storytelling when you really flesh out your villainous characters to the point where a little tiny part of you is rooting for them.
Yeah.
because they've been humanized so much, even though they're awful, and even though what they want is awful. You just can't help but empathize with someone after you kind of see them struggle and demonstrate their positive qualities, even if those positive qualities are all just like ruthless cleverness.
I think that's why the fake out with her at the end bothered me so much, because I like the fake out better than I like the truth, right? I
Yeah.
love this idea that she's here about to succeed at the end of the thing, and she looks over there and sees both of her dead sisters and says, eternity is meaningless to me now because I've lost the people I want to be with, which is kind of like an overarching theme of the whole movie, because like that is one thing that like Yvain is an eternal being, right? She's an eternal being. She lives up in the sky. She watches everyone, but she's just watching. She's removed from it. And this is this feeling of that she's getting to go down here and live amongst these people and feel the things that they feel. And the end of the movie is her and Charlie Cox live forever because they've given their hearts to each other. And so they live for as long as they want on Earth, and then they go live up in the stars forever, because that's the eternity that's good. That kind of giving of the heart. The other half is like the important, like you have your two antagonists, right? And both of them have siblings, and one of them seems to be like, I love my sisters, I'm doing this for all of us, and the other is like pushing his siblings out the window.
Yeah.
And so when the fake out reveals itself as a fake out, both those antagonists kind of line up as just like the same, right? They both are just don't give a shit about their family, don't give a shit about their siblings, which does segment them very nicely from the protagonist, because he is someone who very much likes his family. Like he's likes his father, respects his father, never knew he had a mother. So he gets to meet his mother. Like this is about family coming together in a certain way. But I would have liked a little more differentiation in our antagonists in that regard.
Yeah, I feel you, actually. I think that I might have preferred the movie's conclusion if they had just left her weeping over her dead sisters. That would have been a bit of a downer, but I feel like the movie has enough of a kind of tonal agility to recover from that. And it would have made her character much more interesting and complex.
Yeah.
And I think that it wouldn't be out of place, because every indication was that she totally was going to go kill the star and bring the heart back for her sisters to share. Like at no point did we get an indication that she was going to trick them. And they had been living they actually had sort of a delightful, bratty, but not unpleasantly violent sibling relationship.
Yeah.
And if anything, like, you're kind of sad when the sisters die, because you're like, oh, I hate it when siblings die in any context.
Yeah.
Even if they're evil witches. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but
no, I loved the mirror scenes, right? Every time she like mirror projected herself back to them and they're chastising her for her clumsiness. Yeah, that felt like a very real sibling relationship. And the movie, it tricked me good, because the emotions when she looks over and sees the two of them dead, that worked on me too. That felt real. That felt like she was looking, and these are people she loved. And yeah, they didn't get along. It's like classic siblings, right? They didn't get along all the time. They annoyed the shit out of each other. They've been living with each other for millennia and they're just sick of each other, but they still love each other. And the idea of surviving without your family around is a bummer. And I think that's everywhere in the movie. I mean, that's what Shakespeare is, right? He's a person that, like, his family is his crew, and these are people that love him and accept him. And he thought he needed to hide who he was from these people, but he finds out that no, they love and accept him for exactly who he is. And that is what makes life worth living, is the people that you spend it with. Right. I think that's a lot of what this movie is saying. And I guess they were worried that having an antagonist who kind of thinks that would maybe hurt the protagonist antagonist binary. But I think I totally agree with you that if the end was just them like slowly walking out of the castle as she's in the background, like weeping over her dead sisters, because what's the point? That feels right to me.
Yeah. I think again, like, it does change how that ending feels. But I could have bought it. I think ultimately the moment to moment pacing of the scene, I don't quite know how I would rearrange it. because it does work. Like, it just works really well in a, okay, they blow her away with the star magic, which actually, you know, regardless of everything we just said, it's a pretty satisfying moment of like,
Oh yeah.
okay, cool. Like she has power, and then
Yeah.
and then the stone, and then turns red, and then the ghosts disappear, and then like it, and then that segues into, I mean, it basically segues directly into the coronation scene, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's funny. It's funny because literally all of my complaints about this movie boil down to the sorts of things that I would always get completely hung up on when trying to plot out really complicated stories, like I just said, and be like, oh, but this has to go before this, and if this happens, then I can't do this. And like, it's possible that they literally considered all these things. They had all of these ideas we're talking about on a whiteboard, and they were like, no, we can't do that, because if we do that, we can't do this other thing over here. And maybe the movie had to be this way. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm willing to extend it kind of the benefit of the doubt because it works so well 99% of the time.
Yeah, storytelling is hard. It's difficult, and I mean, you just get into situations like this sometimes where there's no wrong answer. There are just the less bad answer, and that's the one you just try to make the best thing you can.
Yeah.
I mean, overall, the movie is delightful. I laughed. I was emotionally affected. I think you know, you talked about the Stardust scene at the end where she like does the shininess. I think that is so cheesy, but it works.
Yeah.
Because it's part of like a 3-beat of what do stars do, you know, like this is this thing that she's been saying to him throughout the whole movie, and like this is the culmination of it. Is they make really bright light that disintegrates witches, obviously.
Yeah. They're giant balls of hydrogen fusion. So
well, okay, no, Matt, they're not.
No.
They're
right.
women up in the sky, and if you throw an amulet at them, they'll fall out of the sky.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, well, I mean, it is funny because I feel like just the ability to have this sort of rather nitpicky debate over how to change a particular scene is actually a sign that a movie worked really well, because it means we actually care about what happened in the scene and about the characters and how the characters resolved their drama and conflict. So yeah, that's all good.
Yeah. I love it. I one thing we haven't talked about is you will not see or touch or hear the star. That's just a wonderful little conceit there. And I kind of guessed what was going to happen as soon as she said that. It's like, again, like this movie is complex in the way it weaves, but the overarching story is fairly simple. It's just like deceptively complex in its simplicity. But so like, I'm totally fine with like reading that right away. It's like, oh, well, she's going to come upon them and not see her at all.
Yeah.
I will say that was a little anticlimactic in that, that like he turns her into a chipmunk and then just takes him where he's going, and then just turns him back.
Yeah, I don't know why that happened. You know, it's funny that the more I think about it, the more kind of little things like that jump out to me, or like that's the kind of stuff that I was noticing on my second watch, where I was like, "Well, wait a second, but why?" Like in the moment, it's okay because you're like, "Oh no, drama.
Yeah,
this is bad for our characters." And then the fact that she just lets him go, you're like, "But she didn't." But she's a witch. Like, I don't understand. It doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It is fun.
It's so. But you know, so Scott, do you think this belongs in the Doof canon, though?
Oh, here is the question that I've been dreading ever since we started this conversation. I don't know. That's the thing, is I'm really torn about this. Like the last 2 months, we've had, in my opinion, pretty cut and dry cases. Like pretty simple. We had Into the Spider-Verse, one of the best animated films I've ever seen. Absolutely. Hands down. Loved it. Easy yes. We've had Mad Max Fury Road. Again, one of the best action films ever made. Loved it. Easy yes. And then we have this, a movie I like a lot. I like it a lot. Do I want to put it on a list of of our website's greatest films of all time? I don't know. And here's what I'm going to do. So our friend and partner, Elliot, we originally wanted him for this episode. He couldn't make it because time zones, which suck. But I asked him to just he thinks this. He says this is one of his favorite movies of all time. He loves this movie. He loves this movie so much. And I said, Elliot, if you can't make it to defend your movie, why don't you just write me like a quick blurb explaining why you like this movie so much, why this is one of your favorite movies. And so I have, this is from Elliot. I'm going to read it real quick, and then you and I can vote after that. Okay?
Okay.
So Elliot says, I think the beauty of Stardust's story is in its simplicity. Oops, Matt. Oops. Gaiman wrote the original story to fit into pre-Tolkien English fantasy and fairy tales, and it works because these are simple and powerful stories touching on fundamental concepts like the power of love and the wonder of magic. Modern Western storytelling is in many ways built on the back of these kinds of stories, and Gaiman does a masterful job of tapping into what made them work. The movie is a fantastic adaptation, with an abundant charm and beautiful color palette that evokes all the whimsical wonder of the story perfectly. The casting is absolutely top-notch, right down to Ian McKellen as narrator, and all of these things really just lead to an incredibly cohesive and enjoyable movie, which stands out amongst other modern fantasy films, but is also more original than other fairy tale adaptations. Well said, Elliot. Look at that. He's got away with words, that guy.
Yeah, he should start a podcast.
Yeah. Okay, so now I've bought time as much as I could to come up with a decision here. I think I'm going to say yes, and here's my argument. There's a lot of really, really bad fantasy movies out there, Matt. There's like That's a true. Lot of like super, super bad fantasy movies, especially adaptations, right? And I think Lord of the Rings is a better film than this. I think Lord of the Rings is a better book than I think The Hobbit is a better book than Stardust. But I am okay with this representing us on our list, right? Like, I think this is the type of movie that I think represents not just you and me, but you and me and Elliot and Ruben and Brian and Steven and Matthias and Clarence and Jarvis. God, we have a lot of people. That's a lot of people. And all of our community. I think this kind of movie represents us very well. It's fantasy driven. It's funny. It's light. It's just enjoyable. And it's just a fun time to sit down and watch it. And that, to me, feels like the type of movie I want on this list. Is it the best movie of all time? No. Is it the best fantasy movie I've ever seen? No. It has some problems that I think we've talked about. But at the end of the day, I would enjoy looking at a list that had this movie on it, because it would make the list feel different. Because I don't think this probably appears on too many of these kinds of lists, right? Yeah. I think the go-to when you think of a fantasy movie, especially a fantasy adaptation, everyone's going to go, well, obviously Lord of the Rings has to be on the list. And I think that is a true statement. I think Lord of the Rings should be on this list. But I don't just want to make the same list that everyone else makes. I want to make a different list. And in that, I think I'm going to vote yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the fun things about the concept of the Doof canon is kind of an opportunity to grind our categories a little bit finer than just to say fantasy. So maybe if we say like fairy tale, this might be the best fairy tale movie that I know of. I don't know if I really can't think of that many fairy tale movies in the first place. But the thing is, I thought this movie was delightful since the first time I saw it. This is a movie that I've actually shown to my kids more than once. Like, I showed it to them kind of as soon as I could, which is always the sign of something that I'm just really excited to share with them, which is my kind of external manifestation of I must really like this movie. I mean, I think all of the sort of caveats that I had today are really things that are pretty superficial. And I think it would feel weird and dishonest of me to even vote no on this, just because I've always said I love this movie. I've shown this movie to several people. So I vote yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think a no vote from me in this instance would just be me telling myself, "Oh, I can't. This is not serious film. It needs to be a serious film to be on this list."
Yeah.
And I would be lying to myself. So,
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, that's what we have to say. It is now up to you, listeners. Do you agree with us? Does this feel right to you? Does this feel like it belongs on the list? So there is a link in the show notes of the episode you're listening to right now. If you're listening to this episode, that link is active. You can go click on it. It sends you to our Patreon account. That's patreon.com/doofmedia. You do not have to be a patron to vote. This is a public post. It is open to everyone. You do have to create a Patreon account because that's how it makes sure people aren't voting twice and all that. But you do not have to be a subscribed to us. We're not this. We want this to be a public poll. We want it to be available everywhere. So just click on that link, make an account, and go vote, and let us know, is Stardust good enough to be in the canon? The canon. Doof. All right, Matt, we got a quick round of what we've been watching here, right?
Yeah.
It's not every day Matt watches a movie, so when Matt does watch a movie that's not specifically for the show, I always want to talk to him about. So Matt, you watched a movie. What did you watch?
I watched Extraction, starring Chris Hemsworth.
Is that the Thor guy?
That's Thor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what everyone says. That's what whenever I tell anyone I watched Extraction, they say, "Oh yeah, that's one of Thor." Mm-hmm. Yes, it is a solid action flick. I don't know why. As you know, I never watch movies or TV shows or really anything unless it's for Doof stuff because I don't know. There's a lot of stuff to do in this life of ours.
Yes, and much of it is us making podcasts.
But for whatever reason, I found myself not really having anything else that I could or felt like doing on like a Sunday afternoon. Watched Extraction, and I'm just like, yeah, like this is a good movie. It's got great like super violent action, which is fun. Chris Hemsworth is really solid. Like this is sort of his lane. I think he has a bit of range actually, but I think this is sort of the thing that he is really good at. Actually, is just brooding and big muscular violent man stuff, but also like with the brooding dark side to him.
Sure.
The setting kind of. I think just like everything about the setting and the story is really well executed. You really buy all the side characters. You kind of hate who you're supposed to hate, and you care about who you're supposed to care about. And overall, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this. It's not like it's a world changing thing that everybody has to go run out and see, but I definitely give it a positive review if you're into violent action movies where a lot of people get shot in the face. Yeah. This is a Netflix original, which I think is another bonus point for it because most Netflix originals are not very good, and so the fact that this is good is already gives it a leg up compared to a lot of the other films. Yeah. So this movie is. Sorry, yes, I've seen it. I've seen it. This movie is directed by a man called Sam Hargrave, who actually is a stunt coordinator and stuntman. He basically did stunts on every single of the Russos' Avengers movies, any of their MCU movies, actually. This movie was written by Joe and Anthony Russo, so like this is like part of the Joe and Anthony Russo. We made billions of dollars and we can make whatever we want now. And so they wrote this script, and they said, we want to make it. And they gave it to Sam Hargrave, who's their long-term stunt coordinator friend. This is his first feature film. And they had their friend Chris Hemsworth, Thor, play in it. And so it's very much like like a bunch of friends got together and made a movie that costs a few $1 million, and they can get away with it because they made the Avengers movies, Matt. It is way better than it has any right to be. Like, I just feel like this movie, in any other place, I would see this movie and be like, this is gonna be dog shit. And there was a part of me that when I saw the trailer for this movie was like, this is gonna suck. This is gonna really suck. And yet it doesn't. In every time I think it's going to do what the typical action movie does, it does something else. It does something very interesting. I love, the Chris Hemsworth is clearly our main character, but there's another character who's kind of against him at some point. But then they end up allying in the end. Yeah. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. I really like that guy too, whose name I'm blanking on his name because it's been a few months since I've seen this, but yeah, I don't think I ever internalized his name, but I liked that whole element. I liked a lot of the you know, a lot of the story was way better than you normally get in this kind of action movie.
Right.
So that was really good. It's funny because Chris Hargrave was the, if you've seen the movie, you'll recognize this, but he's the sniper on Chris Hemsworth's team at the beginning of the movie.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's actually in the movie.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Yeah. In addition to being the director, so that's pretty fun. I didn't know that until you said that he was, and then I looked it up. That's fun.
That was really fun.
Yeah. So, you know, again, I don't know. I've always been into, you know, violent action movies. So some people aren't, but I recommend it if you like those.
Well, and I'm very much into these stunt directors turned directors, stunt coordinators turned directors, because like we've had a lot of good movies that have come from a lot of really great action movies that have come from stunt coordinators. It's almost as if these guys really understand action and how to choreograph it and how to shoot it, like a lot. Like the John Wick movies are incredibly choreographed.
Yeah,
and those comes from former stunt men and stunt coordinators and stuff. So and then here's another example. Where this movie is way better than it should be, and the action is very good in this movie. I think one of the things that this movie is most known for, I think the thing that they pushed when they marketed it was this. There's one scene where there's a very long oneer, and I think it's a fake.
Yeah.
Like I think it's like 10 minutes long or something ridiculous. And I'm pretty sure they do fake outs like you know they do, where they stitch a scene together and like have the camera like swoop over a dark part to hide the cut. Watch 1917, and that's basically that entire movie. But I think it still works as a oneer because it's just this intense action sequence that will not allow you to leave the tension. Like the tension just builds and builds, and like the movie gives you no escape from it until the fake oneer's over. And that was really cool.
Yeah. I think I know exactly what sequence you're talking about, and I think it doesn't draw too much attention to itself as being a oneer. I think that the oneerness of it just amplifies the tension of the scene that you're in, which I think is how you want to do that. You know, I think maybe the most controversial thing I could say is that I think that the action in this movie works for me a lot better than John Wick. John Wick's a great movie, but John Wick has this sort of like mannered, like John Wick is sort of in a fantasy world where it's a plausible thing to do, to take on like a 10,000 guys with a handgun. And like a thing that happens a lot in John Wick is like 6 guys with guns will for some reason like run toward John Wick while pointing their guns at him, but inexplicably not pulling the trigger, and then he'll jujitsu all of them and kill them. And it's like, but like the way it's shot, you're always like, okay, fine, whatever. But your brain kind of catches that this is not a realistic way that humans would ever fight. But this movie, if you care about such things, seems to be a lot more realistic, at least in my opinion, in terms of how the combat evolves. And I mean, it's unrealistic in the sense that it's one guy killing 10,000 people, but it's in a way where you're like, yeah, I could see that maybe happening. Sure. Anyway.
No, I get that. I totally get that. I think I still like the action in John Wick better, but I know exactly what you mean. And I would have agreed with that until I played a video game called The Last of Us, in which I blindly charged towards other people with guns because I was trying to save my bullets and didn't want to use my bullets on them. So I can't agree with that anymore. but I know what you mean.
That's like the conceit of John Wick, is that he's just so good that he can do these impossible things. So that's fine.
His suit is fucking bulletproof.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Also,
he just holds up the thing and then boo, 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 and the bullets don't like flap the suit and then just hit him. They just stop it. They just stop it.
Yep.
It's awesome.
Yep. It's like I said, it's a fantasy world.
Fucking love those movies. Cool. Yeah. So Extraction, it is available on Netflix right now. And I think they said they're going to make a sequel. It did well enough. Don't quote me on that, but I think I remember reading that.
Oh, okay. That's fun.
Well, maybe not a sequel for reasons, but a
continuation.
Yeah. The thing I wanted to talk about that I watched this past week was a little film called Hamiltown.
Yeah, I've heard
A.
of this.
Ham.
I've heard
Yeah.
of this.
So as we talked about last week, Disney Plus released their recording of Hamilton onto their streaming service this past week. And instead of pushing it in the theater in 2021, which was their original plan. And so I, along with God, it seems like half of America, if not more, watched it this past weekend. And I am one of those that was fortunate enough to get to see the play on stage on Broadway. I did not get to see the original cast, but I have seen the play before. And I'm very excited about this whole thing because so many people that cannot afford those insane prices on Broadway are finally getting to see this thing. And I gotta say, I loved watching it. I loved experiencing it again. I've listened to this album so many times, countless times, all the way through. Like just so many times. I have the entire thing almost memorized because I love it so much. And yet, sitting there and getting to watch it again was a really transcendent experience for me. And part of it is because it's just so fantastically written and performed and everything. Part of it is because of the way they shot this thing. It's actually super interesting, Matt. They recorded, I think, 3 live performances. So over the course of 3 days of live performances, they just stuck some cameras up there and recorded them. But then for some of the numbers, they also recorded them separately and got like cameras like up on the stage to do close-ups. And so it's really interesting because this is like, when I did see this play, I was like in the fucking back. I was in the back because tickets are really expensive. At least claims our seats were better than that. But we're even like middle of the theater, the people are very small up there. And so
Sure.
I like when it cuts to close-ups, you get to see their facial expressions. You get to see the little things, the little choices that the actors are making. Like a lot of Broadway is making big choices because you have to let the people in the back see them. But they're also doing little things that only the front row could have seen. And we got to be the front row for some of these things. And I think they did a very, very good job of adapting this thing or shooting this thing to be the best of both worlds, where you could cut to the wide shot where you see the entire stage and you see the whole stage versus choreography. But then you cut to this low angle shot where you're like going by all the main characters lining up and like swooping by them in really dramatic ways. It was just so well done. Like it just makes the performance even more intimate than it already felt when you were there in the theater. And it's never going to be 1-to-1, right? It's never going to, like, seeing live theater is a truly unique experience. Like it's just powerful and magical in a way that recording it on camera will never capture. But I thought they did a really fantastic job with this thing. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I actually watched about 30 minutes of it, and I was trying to culturally educate my kids, and I think that I did limited success because it's frankly hard to understand what they're saying when they're sing talking and you don't know what they're talking about anyway because you're 7 years old. But so I did get a lot of what you're talking about there, even though I didn't see the whole thing. And yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed it when people film stage plays or stage performances of different kinds, because it's like this fun. It's all of the interesting little quirks of stage performances with the sort of extra things you can do with a camera, where, like you said, you can capture the facial expressions, and just have an angle on it that you couldn't have possibly had in real life. And I thought it worked really well.
It's deceptively complex what it takes to do that. What they did was very, very difficult. And it requires a smart director who makes those choices. Yeah, and I think it's wonderful. Like, there's so many documentaries out there that are just not even documentaries. It's just a recording of a live performance by like an acclaimed director, and they put their personality into the choices that they made with camera placement of this performance. And it's a fascinating thing. I love it. And I hope that this is kind of the beginning of us seeing more of this, because one of the things that frustrates me so much about Broadway in particular is how inaccessible it is. Like, even when Hamilton started touring and hitting other cities, it was still crazy expensive, if you could find a ticket at all. Even if you were willing to pay the thousands of dollars, there just weren't tickets for it. And so anything that kind of opens the theater up in this kind of way is very exciting to me.
Yeah.
We talked about this way back when I defended the live action Aladdin movie, when I said that, they make stage performances of all these Disney movies, but most people don't get to see the stage performance. And a live action Aladdin movie is kind of like a stage performed version of Aladdin, but one that is more accessible. And this is even more directly that, right? And I hope it's the beginning of a trend. I hope, Dear Evan Hansen is a play that I've seen that I absolutely loved. Hades Town is one that I have not seen, but I've listened to the cast album many times, and I would love to see that one. But Broadway doesn't exist anymore, Matt, because of coronavirus. So, I want more of this. More people do this.
Yes, please.
Cool. Well, that is it for us this week. As we said, Extraction is on Netflix, Hamilton is on Disney Plus, and Stardust, if you want to go back and watch that again after you listen to us talk about it, is also available on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
So that is all we had for you guys this week. If you have any opinions on any of the stuff we talked about, feel free to reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at doofmedia. And remember to click that link in the show notes and vote for whether Stardust gets in or not.
Yeah. And if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And you can find this and all of our shows over at our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you can see our show, Kingslingers, that Matt referenced on this episode, but you can also see a bunch of other shows from everyone in our network. We have people talking about books. We have people talking about TV shows. We have a monthly game club that plays a different game and then meets live on the first Saturday of every month. So there's a ton of stuff over there. You can check it all out at doofmedia.com.
Yeah. Also,
and
go ahead.
Sorry, I hadn't finished my thing.
Sorry.
My pitch.
Sorry, Scott.
If you like what we do here, and this is the most important one, Matt. This is the money one.
Oh, okay.
If you like what we do here and want to support and make it happen, we are a fully Patreon-funded media group. Every one of our podcasts is funded by our listeners, and you can become one of those listeners by heading on over to the Doof Media Patreon. That's patreon.com/doofmedia. You're already going to be over there voting yes or no on whether Stardust gets in, so why not just throw a buck there as well?
Yeah, $1, $5, cup of coffee a month.
$300 a month.
$300 a month. Any of these numbers are equally good.
Please don't actually do the $300 one. I wouldn't know what to do. I'd say no, take your money back, please. We're not worth it.
I'll accept your money.
Of course.
Also, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, because every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks, that is it for us, and we will see you back here next week with another patron-produced episode. This time we'll be talking about the animated film Rango.
Rango.
I don't know why I'm saying Rango like that.
Me neither.
Johnny Dash.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.